Well, just a couple of things I want to just say about counseling in general, and then we're going to just any questions. I did have somebody ask about eating disorders that I was going to try to deal with, but this is going to be kind of an all-comers kind of sort of deal. What's a Christian perspective? Before that, I just want a couple of things. One thing, if you're going to do this, even if you're not going to do it formally, if you're going to be informal about it, and just in discipling, you need to understand the concept, the biblical concept of gossiping, or in the field they call it confidentiality. It's funny, you're going to find that the secular field has kind of taken some Christian concepts and tried to make them sound more, more official, like we need to protect confidentiality. Well, that's been an issue in the Bible for a long time. The Bible's been very concerned about gossiping. And if you are going to invite people to tell you their story, if you're going to say, tell me more, gosh, it sounds like you're really struggling, or tell me more about that, then you need to understand that you have entered into a category in that person's life where you have a treasure of theirs that you don't have the right to share. And so confidentiality is a pretty big deal. I think one of the reasons elders have lost their position in some people's lives, in some churches, I don't think in ours, I think the elders here do a really good job. But is it that I had a person once tell me, I said, have you talked to the elders in your church about this? And the person literally said, I would rather talk to a random person from the phone book than my elders about this. And I said, why? I said, well, because it would then become common knowledge in the church. And so confidentiality, and that's not the case with our elders. That's not the case at all with our elders here. But confidentiality is the idea that somebody else's story is theirs to tell. Now, are there exceptions to that? Well, yes. In my field, I'm a mandatory report with the state of Tennessee. So if I thought a child was in harm's way, or if you were in danger to yourself or others, remember that phrase, because that's the phrase that if you ever want somebody to get, if you ever want to force somebody into treatment of some kind, even if it's just they need to stabilize, the phrase that kind of trips the medical field to do something is, I'm afraid that they're a danger to themselves or to others, because that they don't want to get sued, and if they let somebody out of the emergency room who then goes and kills himself or kills somebody else, they're afraid for that. So there is in the state of Tennessee and really all throughout the country, there's a thing called a Baker Act, and the Baker Act is an involuntary treatment that is forced on somebody. It can never last more than 72 hours unless it's collaborated by multiple physicians, and because we take it pretty seriously to take somebody in and give them medical care without their permission is a big deal. Matter of fact, it's really considered a police act. But to Baker Act somebody or to put somebody in involuntary treatment requires them to be in danger of somebody else or others. So the idea of not gossiping, when somebody tells you the story of their lives or some problem they're having, it's your responsibility not to tell that to other people. Now, there are exceptions within a church. But if something that would require church discipline, hopefully I've already been honest with that person enough to know that I'm a part of an elder board, and if there's something that has to do with church discipline, I may need to reveal that. But usually, even when that's the case, I say, I'll go with you to the elders, or I'll go with you to an elder so that you can report that. If you're ever, and anybody who works with youth or anybody, if somebody ever says to you, I'm going to tell you something, but you've got to promise not to tell anybody, say, no, then don't tell me. If you're going to tell me, you need to trust me that I'll deal with it with confidentiality. But if I thought you were going to harm yourself or someone else, I wouldn't have a choice but to tell. I don't know how many people have been kind of, especially that work with a youth will say, I'm going to tell you something, but you got to promise not to tell anybody. And And then they tell you, well, I'm doing this, and say, oh, I thought you said you'd never tell. And well, when they so confidentiality, you have to be incredibly careful with people's stories. You don't share those stories with other people. And here's the way that Christians do this. I've got a prayer class. Hey, would you pray for little Billy Bob? Well, he's having some struggle with, and then you fill in the blank. And all of a sudden, you just told Billy Bob's story that you didn't have the right to tell, but you did it in such a Christian-y way. Now, is it okay to ask for prayer for other people? Sure. But if somebody's telling you a secret, you're supposed to kind of keep that in to yourself. I'm kind of a talker. And sometimes that's hard for me. If I know some incredibly interesting thing. But believe it or not, even Mr. I talk too much, I'm going to go to my grave with a lot of secrets. I mean, I just got a lot of secrets that I'm just going to go to my grave with because I don't have the right to tell them. And some of them are ugly. But I think that's what you do when you're going to be doing this. So the broad category that I would say for you is confidentiality. In the secular world, they'll talk about confidentiality. We would use the word gossiping. I mean, the biblical concept is gossiping that they've turned into. There's also a thing in the professional world of counseling that would say you should avoid or not have dual relationships. And what that means is, I need to be careful when I'm talking to somebody that, because it can get messy. If I have information about something that other people don't have, or if I have some knowledge that other people don't have, that's really, and it puts me in an advantaged position. And so in the secular world, they say, don't ever do that. Don't have dual relationships. And it's kind of almost impossible, but they say that. And their goal in that is to keep counseling from getting messy. And I would suggest to you that's not possible. Counseling is always going to be messy. You just have to, the commitment biblically would be, I will not use this information for my advantage. I won't try to get free stuff, or I had a pastor years and years ago, not in this town. You wouldn't know him, but every year he worked out a free vacation, and here's how he would do it. He would get up and say, well, 3 weeks from now, my wife and I are going to go ahead and take about a week off. I guess we'll just do a staycation here, just to try to save money. And I mean, every single year, somebody would come to him and go, hey, we've got a condo in Belize, and we'll buy your way there. And then so the next week, well, we've kind of, with the generosity of Brother Bub, we're going to go to Belize this year. And I would go, that's okay. People be generous to pastors, and we ought to, and that would be okay. But if you're going to get in the role of discipling, you can't do that. You can't take advantage of somebody. You can't use the power you have of knowing stuff so that you get, a free car wash. I mean, you just, and so that's why in the world of counseling around a church, that's kind of a little bit sticky sometimes. At what point are just people being generous and it's okay? At what point are you taking advantage of and getting free stuff you shouldn't get? I mean, I know a counselor who's got a boat that he got a client somehow to give him. I'm thinking, a boat? I should have. So anyway, maybe I should give up credibility for a while and just try to get more stuff, and then confess after I've got all the stuff, and then write you all from Belize and say, While I was on my sailboat today. So confidentiality, dual relationships, those are issues. In the world of counseling, the first thing is do no harm. And whenever possible, I may not always be able to help people, but I don't want to make things worse. Do no harm. And when possible, I'm going to try to do everything I can to bring them to an understanding of who Christ is and have them understand what's going on in their lives through a Christian lens, so that God can use what's going on in their lives to bring them to Him. So confidentiality, dual relationships, don't do harm, I used to tell people this is going to be a little. I had one of my students call us last weekend, and their lives have fallen apart, and I got off the phone and I said to him, I wonder if any of this ever even works. Do people really get better? These are people I had in class. They should know better. This should have worked. And so I think this is going to, maybe I should have done this the first night and it would have been a very short class, but I think you've got I don't need to draw this up. You've got about a third of the people that you talk with are going to get better no matter what you do. Because they're incredibly motivated. They love Jesus. They're gonna submit to Him, and they're gonna look for the Word of God. They're gonna try to be what God wants them to be. And you could go in there and read the dictionary, and they're probably gonna get better. And you'll feel really good, like you're a great counselor. And probably about a third of the people that you talk to aren't gonna get better no matter what you do. You could stand on your head and recite the Bible in two languages backwards, and that seems like a pretty impressive thing, by the way. And they're pretty committed to their way of seeing the world, and they're always a victim, or they're always they're the yes butters in the world. You know what I mean by that? A yes butter. You say, "How you doing?" They go, "Yes, but." Well, I think there's something you need to look at in your life. Yes, but. Well, I think, huh? That's right. And those people probably aren't going to get better. They could, because nobody's outside of the hand of God. But you don't need to. What does it say? You're not as good as you are in your best moment. You're not as bad as you are in your worst moment. I think Kent State said that last night as they were getting on the plane to go home. We're not quite as bad as we probably were in our worst moment. But you need to, and then about a third of the people, that's where I think really good work is helpful, and good counsel is helpful, because but ultimately remember, you can't fix anybody. God fixes people. Your job is to be faithful with engaging them with some of the things we've talked about, with the Word of God and with the truth of God and the people of God, and then. But I think when somebody does that well, that's that third in the middle that really can be helped by good discipleship, good counsel. So the last thing I want to talk about in terms of just kind of being a discipler is don't get too into this. Because you're probably, at that point, you're probably doing it for you instead of others. Somebody once asked me, how do I pick out a good counselor? I said, look for somebody who's tired and is not too enthusiastic about seeing you. And they go, why would I want to pick somebody who's tired and doesn't really, because if you call a counselor and say, I was wondering if I can meet you anytime, what time, what there, where, I'll meet you tomorrow, I can't wait, I want to meet you, yes, how can I help you? I think they probably don't realize they're dealing with deep, deep hard work. And they're probably doing it for themselves more than for you. And so if somebody's, I'm enthusiastic about, I don't think there's anything as energizing as seeing somebody choose love in the midst of pain. That's what takes place on the cross. When you're dealing with somebody and they make that choice, that is exciting. People say, I can't believe you do what you do. He listens to people's problems all day. I don't listen to people's problems all day. I often get a chance to hear people talk about faithful living in spite of their struggle, and that's exciting work. But be careful. I get nervous about the person who's a little too excited about this. Back when we were a little closer to the Vietnam War, I used to tell people they want to pick a counselor, like somebody who just signed up for their second term, their second term in military. Kind of like, I'm good at this. I'm a good general. I'm a good sergeant. I'm a good soldier. So I'll do my soldiering, but not, boy, I can't wait to go and go fight the battles. There ought to be a little bit of weariness to somebody who's doing this work well, and just be leery of the people that are a little too, and you don't want to become one of those people that are a little bit too excited about. Sometimes I just want to meet people who don't struggle with anything. I mean, if you find out something really bad about C.S. Lewis, don't tell me. Because I want to go to my grave having a fantasy that he was probably pretty good, didn't probably struggle that much. I know that's like completely true because I know his wife died and I know he struggled with depression, but I don't want that spoiled. I'm kind of, and there should be a part of this that should be, so don't get too enthusiastic. And the way that it kind of signs you up for that is if you're a little bit too quick to you really want to tell other people the stories you're hearing, or you start to feel like, when the students first started the program at RTS, it's a 2-year program, at the end of the first year, they were all really obnoxious. Because their conversation would be things like, how you doing? Fine. No. How are you really doing? It's like, I'm really doing okay. No, really. I mean, coruscating from your broken soul. What is your angst this day? And it's like, some days it's just, I remember one of my students came to the church that we went to, and it was Easter Sunday. And we just had a beautiful Easter service. And it's the celebration of his resurrection, And this student came to me and says, Doc, how you doing? I said, it's a good day. He's risen. And, and the person, yeah, but no day is really a good day. I want to go, come on, my goodness. It's Easter, for goodness sakes. Put away the counseling hat for long enough to celebrate the risen Lord, And so don't be, and people, when people start sensing that you need to hear their stories, people already sometimes don't like hanging out at our house because they all think I'm going to analyze everything they say. And I don't. Mona's a better analyzer than me. Skylar's probably a better analyzer than me. But, and it's because people, and so if you start getting the reputation of being like, tell me, how you doing? Are you okay? You will attract victims like flypaper, but it's going to end up creepy. It's just going to end up creepy. People are going to kind of go, sometimes you just, it's okay. Remember the first week we talked about external conversations? It's okay to sometimes just have an external conversation. I went to the ball game last night with somebody and it was okay to say, we're up by 1 billion points. And not to turn it into, I wonder I wonder if that quarterback who just got sacked for the 15th time is struggling deep with his self-esteem. Instead I just want to go Rocky Top, So anyway, so just watch that about the danger of being a discipler that kind of has some extra tools like this is you can become really obnoxious. And so be gracious, be kind, be humble, be curious. Curiosity is kind of the piece that I think is one of the most helpful things. So that's what I wanted to cover today. In terms of my notes, I wanted to talk about confidentiality, dual relationships. We've talked about suicide stuff, so I've already kind of dealt with that. And just kind of what to watch out for when you're dealing with this sort of counseling and discipling. So I said we do questions and answers. Anybody have some questions about a particular area or a disorder or a problem or something that they know of that we didn't really address very well? There have been, sometimes people will, because you're a Christian, so because sometimes you're a Christian, people will take advantage of the fact that you care about them instead of, and they'll sometimes kind of expect stuff they wouldn't expect from somebody who's not a Christian. Availability is one of those things. Once you start discipling somebody, once you're an elder, once you're working in church staff, people sometimes feel like you should be omnipresent. And I say, no, that's God who's omnipresent. I'm not always available. But there's just kind of this sense sometimes, well, you should always be available. And so, but, every once in a while a hot fudge cake will go a long way. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Now, there's a camp of people who would be really nervous. And this is a little bit of philosophy. There are two types of people in this world. There are lumpers and splitters. Lumpers tend to see how things kind of come together. And splitters seem to see how we should separate everything up. And the world of counseling and theology is primarily run by splitters. And as a matter of fact, when the new president came to RTS and all the faculty were sitting around meeting with him, and he said, do you all have any questions for the new president? And my question was, are you a lumper or a splitter? Of course, they didn't know what I was talking about. So I said, but I think I see the world that way. What do you think I am?
A lumper.
I tend to be a lumper. And so when I remember when it hit me, I was meeting with somebody I was an elder of a church years and years ago, and I was eating breakfast with this guy, every Tuesday morning. We were eating breakfast together. And then I'd leave and go to my office, and I'd meet with somebody, and I thought, gosh, the only difference in what I'm doing in between these two places is one's a little more professional, and I'm buying my own waffle. And this one, the person's paying money, and it's not, there is a level of formality and a level of professionalism that should be expected. But I think counseling is discipleship in a directed issue. And I even lump coaching and spiritual direction and counseling all in the same group. And so what some people will tell you is that counseling helps people go from dysfunction to function, and spiritual direction helps people get from function to flourish. But I would say that I kind of see it all as the same deal. So you're right. I'm a lumper, and so, but I think I'm a conservative lumper in the fact that I don't lump crazy things with, and I have really strong biblical standards of what I think the Bible teaches. So I don't lump that way. I don't go, well, everybody Muslims believe in a God too. I mean, I'm not that much. I mean, I'm not thinking our Mormon brothers have anything in common with what we believe about Jesus. So I'm not that much of a lumper, but in general, I'm kind of a lumper. So, and our denomination tends to be a splitter denomination. I mean, if you go to the Presbytery, you'll find a bunch of splitters, and there are things we're splitting things about, but I just think, but even in the secular world, they do the same thing. You can get a master's in social work, you can get a master's in counseling, or you can get a PhD in psychology. And all three of those fields would say they're doing different stuff. And you can get a master's in marriage and family therapy. And all four of those disciplines would say they're doing something different. Truth is, out in the real world, yes, the counseling psychologist does more testing. Yes, a clinical psychologist does more psychopathology, probably more serious cases. But what they're really doing isn't that different. So, at least in my opinion. So like I'll refer people to, I'll refer people out to, people that might have different credentials than I have, because I don't think mine are the only ones you could have to help people. And you'll find some churches. Some churches will have a Stephen ministry, which is kind of lay counseling, and then it'll have semi-professional counseling, and then it'll have a professional counselor on staff too, and they'll separate that a little bit. I do think there's times you need to be aware that we all get over our heads and stuff. I get over my head and stuff, and I'll refer out to some things something's real difficult that is beyond my scope of expertise. And so just be aware of that. That doesn't mean that Christ can't be a part of. And don't just say, well, listen, I can't help you. Say, hey, I think I can only help you a little bit. I want you also to meet with somebody else. And you can still do discipling. Yes. The people the people here at this little counseling center, we have 3 counselors right now. All of them will see people for reduced rates, even below the rate what is published. I had a guy from Orlando give me $20,000 when we moved up, and so I started a thing called the East Tennessee Counseling Foundation, and so it still has like $17,000 in it, because I couldn't figure out a way to buy a condo in Belize with the money. And so, like, even just this last week, Melissa was going to see somebody who didn't have any resources, and she said, hey, can I get money out of that fund? And I said, sure. And so there's, there are other places that, that do see people for less. I think a counselor's worth their wages, and I think they got to pay their bills too. But it is pretty expensive, I think, sometimes. Just a regular person. My son wanted to worksheet some things, and I said, listen, we'll help cover your counseling, because I knew on what they make, he'd be real hard pressed to pay, every month every week for counseling, and so. For a master's level counselor, probably Ebenezer, $150 to $175 an hour. A psychologist, probably $200 an hour, maybe up to $250, depending on the psychologist. Well, I know, and I do know some Christians in town that do take TennCare, and I don't take insurance because we have so many people in Oak Ridge. There was a time when a psychological diagnosis could mess with your clearance, and so people would just come in, and in order to use your insurance, you have to have a diagnosis and a treatment plan, and so to use insurance, and so I get a little bit nervous about about being very cavalier with a diagnosis on somebody who might have aspirations to. Now, I don't know that that's the case. I don't know if that's still the case. I just know that my brother was an airline pilot with United, and don't worry, he's not flying now, so don't be afraid. But I remember saying something about taking something for depression or anxiety or something. He said, I couldn't do that. I'd lose I couldn't fly. I couldn't fly if I had that. I said, you couldn't fly if you were treating it? I said, no. If I got a diagnosis for that would affect my ability to be a pilot. Now, whether that's still the case, I don't know. He retired 5 or 6 years ago, so I'm going to have to not buy my jet. I'm going to have to go to Belize with somebody else flying. That's right. On a boat that I'm going to get somebody to give me because I convinced him. Somebody did ask me about eating disorders, and I would just say, with almost every disorder, be curious about what the function of it is in their life. Eating disorders are not primarily about food. Eating disorders are primarily about control and relationships. And so usually you're going to find somebody with an eating disorder who struggles with coming from a controlling background, and I'm going to control my food. If I can control my food, at least that's something I control. And so if you say to them, well, your body's a temple of God, you better eat, to an anorexic person, you're really literally feeding into their very issue. Have I ever told you the story about my experience with an eating disorder group at UT? Chocolate chip cookie dough, does that ring a bell to anybody? Okay, just real quick, I'll tell you the story. So when I was getting my PhD, I did my clinical internship with the University of Tennessee Counseling Center, and so they just plugged me into some things that I was supposed to lead, and so I was leading an eating disorder group on Wednesdays at like 3:00, and so I know you're wondering, why would a chubby, though I wasn't bald back then, man be running an eating disorder group? That's a good question, but I was. And so, and if you know that since eating disorders are about relationships, and often bad relationships with men and bad relationships with their bodies, I would, but anyway, so this one Wednesday, I was on during the lunch hour when I would have eaten lunch. I was the walk-in person. So if somebody walked in, they would see a counselor immediately, and I was that person. Somebody came in during lunch, and so I didn't eat. So I'm hungry. I've not eaten since breakfast. I go into a eating disorder group. It's 3:00 in the afternoon for a 2-hour group, and people with eating disorders really, it's not that they hate food. They really probably love food. They're just controlling the use of it. And so for whatever reason, they decided to talk about their favorite binge foods. And so so this group for 2 hours was going, I'd love to have this brownies. I would just love to eat. If I could just eat brownies, I would eat brownies. And the next person kind of goes, my binge food's pizza. And I'm just thinking, please, don't tell me another story about how you snuck out of your house and ate 7 pizzas. I don't need to hear this story. And so, so the group goes, we would go for 2 hours, and so it's now, 4:00. It's now 5:00. I'm finished the group, and Mona calls and says, would you pick up some food on the way home at Kroger's? And so we lived at the time at Powell in Powell, Tennessee, and so I get in my car. I'm driving down 275. I get off at Merchants Road, where there used to be a Kroger's. Now there used to be a Kroger there at Merchants Road. I get off and I go into Kroger's, and I was supposed to just pick up milk and a couple of things. Well, milk is in the dairy section. And you know what else is in the dairy section? those tubes of chocolate chip cookie dough. Have you know what I'm talking about? Those, they're just lard in a tube. I mean, I think none of us would ever eat if we saw the way that was probably even put in there, you know. So I'm collecting the stuff that Mona asked me to get, and there it is sitting there on the shelf is this tube of raw cookie dough, and I thought, hey, well, I'll just get that tonight. We'll have cookies at our house. And so I grabbed a big extra large tube of cookie dough, and so I go out and put it on next to me in the car, and I start driving home. Now I'm probably 8 minutes from Merchants Road to our house off Emory Road, and at the time, and so I pull back out. I'm going to get on the interstate, and I look over, and there's the tube sitting there, and now I'm the person who just ran an eating disorder group to help others who struggle with food. I mean, my hypocrite meter is about to start to redline. So I look over and I think, well, you know, and so I grab the tube, and it's got a little metal clip on the end of it. You know, it's just got it's really just got a little metal, kind of like a staple on it. And so I bit that off like I was getting a pin out of a hand grenade, and spit it out, and then started squeezing the tube. Cookie dough's coming out. There's cookie dough stuck in my beard, and I can barely see cookie doughs in my glasses, and I'm just driving in this. And I just finished an eating disorder group where I'm helping people have a better relationship with food. You know, you need a better relationship with your body and a better relationship with food. And I'm going, and so I pull in, you know, I kind of come to my senses about when I pull into our neighborhood, and I look down, and, you know, a toothpaste tube that is, you know, that's almost so old. I mean, there's still a little left in it, but you think, we're just going to throw that away. I mean, I don't want to. So I have got this all over, and so I throw it out the window. And I grab the receipt out of the bag and rip it up and throw it out the window so I won't be caught. I'm clearing the stuff out of my beard, and I pull in, and then I'm like an alcoholic hiding evidence of my chocolate chip cookie dough all over the place, and trying to clean up so that Mona won't realize that her husband just ate probably 7,000 calories in a 6-minute period. But that's when it kind of hit me that we're all a mess. You know, and the irony that I was just running this group, and they started talking about their deep longing wasn't for food, but was for connection. And when they get tired, they act out. And when they get hungry or lonely, they act out. And so here I am feeling those same things. And all of a sudden, I've got cookie dough everywhere. And so anyway,
Did you litter? Did you throw it out the window?
Yes, I did. I didn't say that part. I tossed the tube out the window. I'm sure it hit somebody's mailbox. Can you imagine the person who the next day sees this? What is that in my yard? And it was like, and you know, it was a tube of chocolate chip cookie dough that had been just devoured by an animal. So I guess it was good I didn't tell that story the first night, because you wouldn't have come back. But we're all a mess, and I think that's where you need to stay humble when you're going to disciple people, because the same longings that are in the most difficult person you know are in you as well. And what I would say about an eating disorder is that you should always try to look, as I would for everything, try to deal with it behaviorally, see if you can help them to change the things they're doing, but always be curious for what might be underneath it, because that's where the real change is going to take place, if Christ gets in what's underneath those things. All right. Anybody have a topic or an issue they'd like us to deal with or talk through? Yes. Such a good question. There is a power of the present moment you have with them. Did everybody watch, when you watched The Office, the TV show The Office, it was kind of weird the first time you saw it. And what made the show weird was they broke the fourth wall. And so they would be talking, and there'd be dialogue, and then all of a sudden that person is looking at a camera and telling you what happened. So it went from from content, here's what's going on, here's what's going on, to process. Here's what just happened. Here's what I was just thinking. Here's what I was just feeling. Here's what just happened. And that's weird. However, in discipleship, the here and now is one of the most powerful things you can do. And so the here and now with that person might be something like, I think we've created together the same thing you have with everybody else. And because remember, people have a relational style, and so if somebody annoys you, they probably annoy other people. If somebody feels needy to you, chances are they feel needy to other people. And so that's data. Now, I wouldn't be cruel with someone and say, I feel like when I'm with you, it makes me want to puke, and I bet you everybody wants to puke when they're with you. I mean, I wouldn't do that. And I've been, I remember, and this is too brutal. What I'm about to say, this is too brutal. I wouldn't, but just an example of catching somebody. I got one time in RTS, the secretary there handled my private practice as well, and so I was feeling sick, got feeling bad, and so I said, hey, I need to cancel my appointments today, and we looked at my appointments, and I had like 5 appointments, and then we started looking and said, I think I can see this person. Yeah, I'll see that person. Yeah, let's cancel this one. And, so I ended up canceling some of them, but not all of them. Well, one of the people I canceled was somebody who's just incredibly boring. Just an obnoxious person that I just didn't want to be with. And so the next time he came in, and I'd seen him many times, and I'd shown him that I really care about him. This was not cavalier. And he came in, and I said, listen, I apologize for last week and canceling your appointment. He said, no problem. I understand you were sick. And I said, well, I really was sick, but I do want you to know I didn't cancel all my appointments that day. And he said, well, no, that's okay. That's okay. And again, I would never have done this the first appointment. I would never have done this. I would met with him many times. And I don't think he realized the way that he connected or didn't connect with people. And so I said, I purposely canceled yours and one other person because I didn't think I had the energy to meet with you. And he kind of looked funny at me, and I said, now don't misunderstand, you're worth somebody wanting to spend time with. And your life matters. But there's a way that you relate to people that pulls the energy out of the room. And I think you've created with me what you create with almost everybody. And I'm willing to talk with you about why you create that, and let's do something different together. Now, it's amazing, and it may not always go this way, but I kind of earned the right to say this because we'd been together enough. And he said, yeah, I think everybody's bored with me, and that makes me just want to try harder, and then it seems like it gets worse. I said, I bet it does. Let's do something different. Because he was giving himself the very thing he didn't want. He wanted people to like him and connect, but what he was really giving himself was people find him to be trying too hard and annoying and boring. And do you know what I mean? We've all had some people like that. Now, don't do that at the grocery line in Ingalls. I mean, don't say to the person who seems bored, I bet you everybody's bored with you because of the way you act. No, don't do that. But to break that fourth wall and talk about the present. So with the question that you asked, what would I say to a person who you want to kind of give up on? Say, I think we've created between the two of us the same thing that you've created with probably almost everybody in your life. And I want to treat you differently. You've created, what you've communicated to me is that you've kind of yes-butted me. And every time I've said, what about this, or we've talked about this, you've told me yes, but. And that makes me want to kind of give up on you. And I don't think you really want people to give up on you, but I think almost everybody has. So what is going on that would create that, that would make you create that every time, and how could we do something different? And that's a type of counseling and discipleship that's really rare. But it's that part. Remember when I talked about learning to read the pull that somebody has on you? You read that so that you can share it with them. So somebody is going to eventually be who they really are with you. And instead of going, you can go, gosh, it's an opportunity. We've created the very thing that happens with other people, but we can have an honest enough relationship. We can talk about not just the content, but the process of what takes place between us. And let's get this worked out. Because I don't think you want to do this. And this can be dress rehearsal for you doing this in other places. And there's a few people that will respond very eventually. If you've shown you, if they think you're for them, if they don't think you're for them, you've lost them completely. They'll never come back. But if they think you're for them, at that point, they'll go, somebody's finally telling me what. I mean, it's really the question we all want to know, but none of us ever ask. And that's, how do I come across to you? Right? I mean, we all want to know that. I'm in my late 60s, and I want to know how I come across. And so I forced Mona to, after a sermon, to go, well, Mona, what do you think? How was a sermon? And she'll sometimes start by talking about what I said in the sermon, and that's not really what I'm asking. I'm saying, did it come, how did I, you know what I mean? And it's like, do you ever get over wanting to know that little boy question, that little girl question of what am I like to you? What is it? And we never ask that question. I mean, I think in my entire marriage, I've only asked Mona maybe 3 times, what's the hardest thing about being married to me? Because I don't have the courage to ask that very often. Because I bet you she's got a pretty good list. But those are the questions we really want to know, right? And so if you really want to do good discipleship, read the poll someone has on you and then just put it in the back. Don't share it, but see if, make a hypothesis. I think that this person, make a hypothesis, and then when it makes sense, share that process, that hypothesis with them and say, do you want to do something different? I mean, the goal is not to do an archaeological dig in their life. The goal is to help them live and relate differently. That's why I said the first week, or one of the first weeks, is that when I diagnose people, I kind of ask a simple question in my head, would I go eat pizza with them? And if the answer is no, I would not want to go and have pizza with that person. Have you realized that all my examples have to do with food? Is that not scary? Is that not scary for all of you that's my examples?
It sounds normal to me.
Yeah. But if I don't really want to go hang out with that person, chances are other people don't either. And chances are there's something kind of wrong with them that they probably ought to look at. And so it's such a good question. But when somebody's not motivated, there's a style of counseling that's popular in the secular world called motivational interviewing. And all motivational interviewing is trying to move people to a place to make a commitment. Sometimes in motivational interviewing, I'll kind of steal from those people because it's I'll say, so where would you say you are in this area? And they go, about a 5. Well, what would it take to get to a 4? And then see if I can get them committed to kind of, am I willing to move? Because a lot of people, the thought of getting from a 10 to a 1, they don't have any, but okay, what could you commit to? What would be something, so that would be so with somebody who doesn't see that third that doesn't want to get better, I also am aware that I think sometimes they want to get better, they're just afraid to get better. Because getting better means I'm not going to have an excuse to not go out with people, or I'm not going to. I remember I had a phone call once from a client who said, I just wanted to call and tell you that I've changed this is back when we had phones that weren't in our pockets. Said, I've just changed to an unlisted number, and I wanted to give you my number. And I said, so why did you change to an unlisted number? And they said, well, I don't want people to harass me. I said, is that a problem? Have a lot of people been harassing you? No, the truth is, no one calls her. And the reason she changed to an unlisted number is now, when no one calls her, she won't say, they have my number, but they don't call. Now she has a reason to say, we had a guy in a church I went to once that was the one guy you hoped visitors did not sit next to. I mean, every church has somebody like that. Anyway. And I remember he came up to me one day and said, Jim, I decided to give up women. The truth is, women had given him up a long time ago, And so instead of him saying, I'm so offensive, I don't take baths, and I literally have a shirt on right now that you can see my belly, and literally it looks, my hair is so greasy that, you could lube my car with your hair, but, and that's why women won't ever talk to me. Instead, what he said to me was, Jim, I've decided to give up women. And so I think people sometimes, their dysfunctions or their struggles are the way they're protecting themselves in an odd way. And if you can help them get curious about what's the function of your disorder. Because remember, one of my first assumptions is we're teleological beings. There's a reason we do what we do. And often they're very self-protective reasons. And often what you needed to do to protect yourself as a kid, as an adult, is hurting you. And often giving you the opposite of what you want. I had a person once in my office who was much larger than me. I mean, and so I'm a pretty good sized guy. And this person was morbidly obese, I think would be the terminology, probably 450 pounds. Had trouble sitting in the chair in my office. And he'd had multiple degrees, was very bright and very disciplined. And it wasn't, and he would start to try to lose weight, and he would do that for a little while. And he'd get to where he was starting to look a little healthier, and then he would sabotage it and go back up. And that's because he was he was a victim of sexual abuse as a young man, as a young boy, and he just wanted to not be seen as something anybody would be interested in, physically. And so he really pushed himself intellectually and became very, very bright, got multiple degrees, but his disorder, his obesity, and I'm not like more than any of us, by hundreds of pounds, but was his way of protecting himself from something, and until he acknowledged that he wasn't going to lose weight. Remember, if you can't do something you say you want to do, it's because there's a more important goal under the surface that you're being faithful to. So just be aware of that. Yeah, I still have a person that it's funny because I don't do virtual counseling because you miss the nuances of people in the room very much. But this is a person I saw in Florida that I still check in with from time to time. I've spent so much time with pastors that are burnt out through some of the work I've done that I'm just really aware that you can burn out. There have been times in my job since I've been here that I felt like I've been fairly close to that. Not burn out like I didn't like my job, but that I was just had gotten too busy, wasn't taking care of myself, was ignoring things in my family, was just kind of, I wasn't sleeping as well, and you just got to pull away from that. And there are times, there are times that I think a pastor needs to pull out of the pulpit for a little while, and I'm not just because he's been caught in some sort of sin, but it's because he's just been he's lost his ability to rest, and he's lost his ability to see the Bible. I mean, when I'm starting to do Bible study, and I only see it as this would be a good talk, that's a danger, because then, or all my Bible studies are related to things I'm doing. Like right now we're teaching in Hebrews, and so it's not unusual in prime time. It's just not unusual for me to spend some of my Bible study time of the week studying Hebrews, and it's kind of double dipping. But if that's the only way that I look at the Bible is when I'm preparing for something for someone else, that's a sign that I need to pull away and have some personal growth. The same thing, with counseling as well. There's and you in both theology and psychology, there's a moment where you have to learn to be honest about yourself, or you pretend and you start believing your own propaganda. So there's not a counselor who's not had a fight with his wife or husband who then is dealing with counseling that day. I remember one time coming home to Mona and saying, I've either got to quit my job, I've either got to get another job, or we've got to have a better marriage. And it was because I felt like such a hypocrite that I was helping other people get better than we were. And so you've got to have enough integrity to at some point admit your own struggles and be taking them somewhere as both a pastor and as a counselor, or you'll begin to think, it doesn't apply to me. And that's where I'd say you got to stay humble in this stuff. Because you're dealing with somebody else's story, you need to stay humble. That's such a great question. You go to a secular counselor and you say, I think I'm under spiritual attack. They'll immediately start thinking of kind of psychotic. On the MMPI, the test that there's a couple of questions about, do you have a special relationship with God? What's really funny is Christians tend to get a pretty high score on the lie scale, on the lie that they're lying, that they're not being honest.
I think about L-I.
So I always tell people, if you get a high lie score for a Christian, you need to be careful when I would used to teach that test, because there are questions like, I have a special relationship with God. Well, the secular guy expects a healthy person to say no, but Christians often will say yes to that, which I would say yes to, and that's going to, you just went up on the lie scale. Sometimes, anyway. So I would say everything has a spiritual warfare capacity to it, because there's an enemy to the story of glory. Some of those are direct and some of those are indirect. I think most of the way Satan is attacking us is very effective, and it's indirect. With culture, with availability of sexual material on your phone, I think those are clearly there's spiritual warfare going on all the time. I do think there's specific spiritual warfare sometimes, but and when I think that's going on, I'll usually, I've done this. I mean, I might lose my license if they knew this but I've said to couples before, remember when the disciples came back to Jesus and said, this isn't working. This isn't working. And Jesus says, oh, with these sort of things, you need prayer and fasting. And so if I was dealing with a couple that came in for intensive counseling a few weeks ago, and we didn't get anywhere. I felt after, so they were here Thursday afternoon, all day Friday, Saturday till noon. And I felt like I was in I just felt like I was in a barroom fight. I mean, it was just, we weren't getting anywhere. We'd start to have some clarity, and then all of a sudden one of them got real reactive, and we had to kind of, it was just I felt like it was in a barroom fight. And I remember saying, I guess end of Friday's session, I said, I think there's something else going on here, and I think Jesus would say this needs prayer and fasting. And so I'm going to ask y'all to pray and either not eat tonight or not eat tomorrow morning, and then as you leave, an ongoing fasting and prayer, because I think this is spiritual. And I'd love to say, and then the next day everything went great. It did go better, but I do think that there was spiritual warfare there. I get nervous when somebody makes it all that. Because I don't have the demon of baldness. I'm just bald, and I don't have the demon of a messy desk. I just have a messy desk, and I know people that kind of put everything on that. It's like, and I think Satan probably likes it that I have a messy desk. I'm guessing, and he might even like it that I'm bald. But I don't think that's a direct attack. But I think I do think Satan is active and he's trying to destroy you. Yeah, it just regular things weren't working. Satan does not respond to regular things, and so if it's spiritual, then there's going to be other things going on. It won't, there's times where, for a good Presbyterian, there was a good Pentecostal church in Orlando that had a prayer ministry that saw everything as a spiritual problem, and they needed spiritual healing prayer. And I'd send people there. I'd say, I think that's possible sometimes, and I think we're kind of stuck. And if you consider going to, and the elders of this church will pray for healing for people. I don't think. I think we believe God. I think there is a spiritual war going on. You're in a story war between the story that Satan is trying to hijack, that will ultimately be discarded, and the story of glory and redemption that God's telling with your life. And Satan grabs the pen and starts writing. I think you can harm people that's a great question. I think you can harm people by minimizing their problems. Jesus is the answer. But sometimes to say to somebody who's really struggling with everything to just kind of just pour some Jesus syrup and then leave them can harm them. I know a lot of friends of mine from the Pentecostal world who have gone to a healing ceremony and they thought they were delivered, and and for a little while, because it was an emotional experience, they did change their behavior for a little while, but they never dealt with the root issues, and then they found themselves back involved in it, and they went from, I don't trust God about anything, I'm just, and I think that can be harmful. I think to minimize people's pain is harmful. To maximize someone's pain is harmful. To to make them feel like they're the center of the universe and that their pain is more important than anybody else's pain on earth, that harms people. I think secular psychology can harm people if they make, where people constantly will talk about, God wants me to be happy. I think he'd rather you be happy than sad, but I don't know that that's the measuring stick he has. And so, yeah, I think there's lots of ways we can harm people. I think a good secular counselor is very good at cleaning out the wound. If you remember the very first day, we went from reactor to victim, victim to agent, agent to dependent child of God. I think a good secular counselor can help people get from reactor to victim. And a really skilled secular counselor might get somebody from, might at least begin the process of helping somebody get from victim to agent, but that's pretty rare. I think that idea that, and so I, as far as, I think a secular counselor can be very helpful in kind of helping people kind of address some of the things that have happened to them in their lives. But I think real victory or the real kind of movement is going to require dependence on God. And the irony is that secular counselors will acknowledge that sometimes by sending people to an AA where they say, I needed a higher power to deal with my addiction. Which, I don't do it very often here, but I used to speak at Rollins College sometimes in one of the psychology classes because I knew one of the professors, and very secular environment. And they assumed I was just a, fundamentalist goofball. And I would always start by saying, well, let's all agree on one thing. That most everybody would agree that the most successful program working with addictions is a spiritually based program. So we at least all agree on that. And they'd all get mad and go, well, you mean it's not? I said, well, AA is, it's not the kind of spirituality that I would always agree with necessarily, but it's a spiritually based program because they are acknowledging that there's something bigger. So, I would, maybe to challenge them to see if they would be willing to go, I would acknowledge that the counseling experience before was a disaster. So, we meant well, but it was really a disaster. And would you be willing to just consider going to one or two, a couple others and make that, and see if there's a Christian one that you could connect with? But there's a lot of, I may have implied that there's a lot of bad biblical counseling out there because it might be too simplistic. There's just a lot of bad counseling out there. And I've had some bad counseling experiences before with myself. I've not always known the right things to say or missed something important. Sometimes people come in and they're really white hot to change something specific, and I start talking globally about, their deep longings, and they just wanted to, give me 3 steps to give me a book in 4 steps, and I want to do it, and I'm kind of instead going, well, so how are you feeling? And they're going, I'm feeling like you're wasting my time, So the brain is on a continuum between a hunter brain and a farmer brain. So a hunter brain is the kind of brain that when you go through, to be a successful hunter, you need to notice the nuance, right? So you see a leaf, you see just a little leaf move, and you need to notice that because that could be the bird that you're going to shoot coming out. And so to be a good hunter, you have to have a brain that notices the exceptions and it would appear almost an unorganized brain that is always looking around. always looking around, doesn't focus very well. And you put that on a continuum, that's on one side. On the farther other side is a farmer brain, and a farmer brain organizes everything really well, and everything has to be in a row. And you know, Presbyterians tend to be more farmers than hunters. I'm just saying. And sometimes in the American education system, to have a hunter creative brain, you don't fit in very well. You're not very successful. Now, some of those people, when they get out, they'll become entrepreneurs, or they'll become, what did the president of Harvard say a few years ago? He said, I treat my A students really well because they may come back and be a professor. I treat my B students really well because they may come back and come back and watch football games and be a part of it. But I treat my C students real well because they may come back and build me a building. And what he's saying was sometimes what makes you successful in the world of farming, everything in order, might not be the same things that would make you an entrepreneur. And so like schools that work with the kind of the hunter brain, like Montessori schools, you realize that the person that started Facebook, Apple, and one other one were all Montessori students growing up. And that's that sort of elementary school that's kind of like, we're just going to, the sandpaper that is shaped like the letter B, and you're going to feel the letter B with your fingers. I'm going, what? We have medicine that can make a hunter brain a farmer brain. Most of the medicine that we give for ADHD is a frontal lobe stimulant of the brain. And there's a reason we drink coffee when we feel unorganized. There's a reason I drink coffee in the morning. There's a reason I drink caffeine by the bucketfuls when I'm having trouble getting going, because it's a stimulant, and it stimulates the frontal lobe of my brain, and the frontal lobe is my executive functioning part of the brain. And if your frontal lobe is functioning, is highly energized, then you're going to be able to organize very well. You'll be a much better farmer. And so I can make a hunter a farmer by giving him medicine. Now, can it be so extreme? Can you be such a hunter that you can't do anything? Yes. And that's where medicine would be helpful. Can you be such a farmer that people, don't, and people don't always line up in the rows you want them to line up in? Yeah, you could be obsessive compulsive over here. But an obsessive compulsive person can get a PhD. The super extreme person on that side, they're lucky to, get out of fourth grade without, being sent to the principal all the time. And so I do think we over-medicate a little bit. I don't think there's anything wrong with medication when it's helpful. But I think sometimes we over-medicate kids. And I think sometimes we're medicating hunters because hunters don't do well in school, and farmers do. Yes? Well, you eat sin for a living, and that's not really something you can do. A human being can't eat sin. You have to make sure you're giving that to Christ. In the secular world, they say you just don't get too involved with your clients. Keep a real distance. But the problem with that is you keep too much distance, and then they don't think you care about them. But if it gets to you too much, you're not going to be effective. And so there really is a funny balance, so that Christians would probably be farther over this way. But you do have to make sure that you're taking time to enjoy I don't like for the last 5 Mondays, when I've gotten off, Mona and I've driven up to Cades Cove, and right before dusk, you can get in the loop before they close it, and we've seen bears and elk and deer And even Skylar is calm in the back seat. And that's been incredibly life-giving. We've talked about, well, why don't I take Thursday off and we'll spend the night and then also do a run through, do it through it in the morning. And so that's, you say, well, how's that helpful? It's helpful because, it refocuses you on a bigger picture. And ultimately, if you were forced right now to experience all the suffering that anyone in this room is going to go through this week, and you had to carry that with you, we wouldn't get out the door. Let alone if you had to carry the suffering of everybody within a mile of here, you couldn't do it. So be careful you don't get cynical. When you start to get cynical, you need to pull away a little bit. Mona will know when I need to pull away because my sense of humor gets a little more caustic. It's a little more, I can be funny, I'm just saying, but, I can be a little bit snarky in my humor. And when my humor is snarky, it's a tell. So, hey kids, well, we're done. The only exception to that is if you want to be trained in the marriage and test, then email me if you're not in the class and you want to take that marriage test and get trained in that. I'll be glad to train you in that because I need to do it one more time because some of the people that were in the class didn't get the training. So I need to do that. So other than that, it's just been a pleasure to kind of sit with you and think about this. We might want to try to do it again another time when it's not the summer. Maybe pick a time in the spring and maybe do 2 day. Do something like even a Friday afternoon, Saturday morning, or something for 2 weeks or something. But anyway, thanks for coming. Let me pray for us, Father. We don't want to be dangerous because we know a little. We want to be helpful because we know a little. And compared to you, all of us just know a little. But we really want to do want to be people that love your people. And that are your hands and your feet and your ears and your mouthpiece. So Father, whatever of this material has just been about me, I pray that it would quickly just blow off the back. And whatever this material is of you, that you would solidify it in us as we try to care for others and disciple them for your great purposes and glory. We pray in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen.